Hey everybody, this is Rykard here again, and welcome to another Pokemon Movesets video for the new Sun and Moon Pokemon introduced into the 7th generation. Today's video is going to be about the final evolution of the water starter Primarina, so join me as we go under the sea and take a look at this Pokemon's typing, abilities, and stats. So to start things off, Primarina is a water fairy type Pokemon that possesses two abilities, the first of which being the traditional water starter ability in Torrent, which is an ability that increases the power of water-type moves when you get to a third of your health or less. As for its secondary ability though, it is known as Liquid Voice, which is a new ability exclusive to this Pokemon that has a few interesting properties, but the main one being that it turns all sound-based attacks into water-type moves. Meaning that this Pokemon using Hyper Voice, for example, will be using a water Hyper Voice as opposed to just the normal version of it. It's also important to note that Liquid Voice does not work the same way as a lot of the 8 abilities do, such as Aerialate or Pixelate, and that it also boosts the power of these moves. It simply just turns them to a water-type attack. Another interesting thing also to note is that the move Perish Song, which this Pokemon does have access to, is actually blocked by Storm Drain and Water Absorb if you actually have the Liquid Voice ability, which is very interesting as far as like a doubles strat could be concerned, but it's not particularly useful in a singles environment, but just something to keep in mind. As for the stats though, it has a base 80 HP, a base 74 physical defense, and a base 116 special defense, meaning that this Pokemon can be very bulky from the special side, and being a water type, having access to Scald can allow it to also wall physical attackers as well if you land some burns with it. As for its attacking stats though, it has a base 74 physical attack, which is a little bit on the lower side of things, so you're probably not going to be running a physical set with this Pokemon, even though it does learn a couple of physical moves, but its special attack being base 126 is actually the highest special attack of any starter Pokemon to ever occur, which is very cool. Obviously, if we're excluding Megas, I think in some cases if we include the Megas, it's then not the highest. But either way, it's a very unique little property of this Pokemon, allowing it to do a lot of special attacking damage, and it has some great type coverage to make use of this. Lastly, it has base 60 speed, which is a trend among most of the 7th gen Pokemon, as you're going to see, as having a pretty low speed stat. So this Pokemon will be a bit on the slower side, but that does not mean that it can't run an effective sweeping set by throwing a Choice Scarf on it or boosting its speed through other means. But with that, let's take a look at the first set that I have for you in this video. So for this first moveset, it's going to be pretty much your run-of-the-mill offensive set on this Pokemon. So we're going to start by giving it a Timid Nature to increase its speed but lower its physical attack, and then going with either ability depending on which water type attack you would like to go with. As for the EVs, we're going to go with 4 defense, 252 special attack, and 252 speed EVs to give it its max special attack and speed possible. And for the item, going with all of these different options to increase its offensive power through the use of either a Choice Scarf to boost your speed, Choice Specs to boost your special attack, a Life Orb to boost all of your attacks but give you a 10% recoil every single time you damage your opponent, an Expert Belt to boost the damage of super effective attacks, an Assault Vest to boost your special defense, or Leftovers to increase your HP at the end of every turn. As for your moves though, you're going to go with one of these 3 options to be your main stab water type attack, which is in the form of Hydro Pump as your strongest option, though it is a little bit inaccurate, Scald as a weaker option but having the chance to burn, so giving some utility there, or Hyper Voice as a slightly stronger option than Scald in combination with Liquid Voice, and as well also being able to hit Pokemon even if they have a sub up, because it basically just damages them and completely ignores the sub. So that's a little bit of extra utility on that last move if you do want to go with Hyper Voice, otherwise just go with Torrent. As for the other move, which is going to be your main fairy type stab, and pretty much on every single one of these sets, we're going to go with Moonblast here. And then for some type coverage or some additional utility, you can run Ice Beam in your 3rd move slot, or even use Echo Voice in combination with Liquid Voice. And for those that don't know what Echoed Voice does, basically it does increasing amounts of damage every single turn you use it over and over again. And the fact that this Pokemon has access to a water type based Echoed Voice to be used over and over again to increase its power over and over again, this gives it a little bit of a extra utility to basically at the end of a battle potentially sweep a team because of how powerful this move can become if used 3 or 4 times in succession. It'll be much stronger than Hydro Pump and also even more accurate, so that's something to keep in mind. As for your last coverage option though, you can go with either Psychic, Energy Ball, Shadow Ball, and I didn't put this on here, but even a Hidden Power if you would like to, though I don't think it really needs a Hidden Power on this particular moveset. But the cool thing about this type coverage is that this Pokemon actually has the tools to deal with pretty much anything that would want to switch in on it, mainly because of the fact that Water and Fairy are resisted primarily by Grass and Poison type Pokemon. You have Ice Beam and Psychic to deal with both of those, as well as a few other, types that you could potentially not be able to hit for super effective damage. So this Pokemon has a ton of type coverage, which is absolutely fantastic and could leave opponents guessing for a variety of sets that it could potentially run. In addition to this version of this moveset though, however, you could also run a little bit more of a bulky version of this same set by giving it a modest nature and then giving it the EV spread of 252 HP EVs, 252 special attack EVs, and putting the remainder 4 EVs into its speed stat. So that's something to keep in mind. It could work still either way. You wouldn't use a Choice Scarf on this set in particular, but this set is still viable as its own thing to be kind of a bulky offensive Pokemon. As for this next moveset, we're going to run what could be a potentially mixed moveset for this Pokemon, or just a boosting set for this Pokemon in general. So we're going to start off by giving it a Timid Nature again, to give it a increased speed stat but a lowered physical attack stat, or a Naive Nature to give it an increased speed stat but a lowered special defense. As for the ability, again going with either, and then using the same EV spread as before, and also similar item choices as before, with the addition of using Waterium Z, which it will be used in combination with our first move on the set, which could be Rain Dance. Like I've mentioned before, all weather-inducing moves provide a +1 speed boost to anybody using that version with the Z move. So Rain Dance Z will give Primarina a +1 speed boost in addition to setting up Rain, potentially for your team or just for you to make use of to boost the power of your water type attacks. Additionally though, we could also potentially run Workup as a way to boost both our special attack and our physical attack, mostly though the special attack, as this Pokemon obviously does have a higher special attack than the physical one, but as you're going to see in a second, you can actually still make use of one physical move that this Pokemon does get. As to your main water type attack, again going between Hydro Pump, Scald, or Hyper Voice depending on your preferences, and then Moonblast as your primary form of dealing fairy type damage. In the last move slot, however, going with Aqua Jet, Ice Beam, or Psychic are all viable options here for some additional type coverage that will be able to allow you to hit things that would be resisting your stab. And Aqua Jet is particularly interesting here because it actually does give this Pokemon a little bit of priority. And this allows this set to be a little bit mixed if you're only going to necessarily need to use water and fairy type moves on this Pokemon. So it gives it a boosted Aqua Jet if you're using it in the form of using Work Up to boost your physical attack, or it just can be rain boosted in general. So either or works here. And then also the other options again for type coverage. So it's kind of a really cool, unique option that it does get this priority. And I wanted to figure out some way to use it, and I think this is probably the best way to make use of that, either through making it rain boosted or by using Work Up's effect of boosting your physical attack. For this next moveset, we're going to take things a little bit more on the defensive side and go with a Bold Nature to increase your physical defense but lower your physical attack, or a Calm Nature to increase your special defense but lower your physical attack. And then we're going to be going with the ability Torrent. As to the EVs, we're going to put 252 into its HP to max that out, 252 into its physical defense or special defense, depending on how you want to run this Pokemon as a physically defensive wall or especially defensive wall, and then the remainder 4 EVs into its speed just to make it a little bit faster to outspeed possibly other base 60s. As to the item, we're going to go with Leftovers, which is pretty much standard on most defensive sets, and then for the moves, starting off with Encore as a way to potentially lock opponents into moves, thus giving you an advantage that could potentially lock your opponent into a move that you resist or a move that's just not effective against you at all. And you could possibly take advantage of that, switching out, and all sorts of other options. Encore is a great move. It doesn't get a ton of distribution, but this Pokemon getting it is huge for allowing it to be an effective wall or just support Pokemon. As for its next move, we're going to be going with Scald as your main water type attack, again for that 30% chance to burn, along with Moonblast as your secondary stab, being the fairy type stab, which could also assist you in dealing or in taking less special damage because Moonblast does have a chance to lower your opponent's special attack. As for the last move though, there are quite a few options to go with, the first of which being Substitute, which could work really well in combination with Encore because you could potentially sub up on an unfavorable move that you encored your opponent into. You could also go with Protect here as a way to get a little bit of recovery because outside of Leftovers and the use of Rest, which is the next option, Primarina doesn't really have any access to recovery, unfortunately. So this could be very great for that, as well as stalling out for some residual damage. You could also go Toxic as a way of potentially inflicting poison on your opponent, and then also even going with Baby Doll Eyes as a way to lower your opponent's physical attack and allow you to take physical hits a little bit better, which is always really cool. And then the last option, possibly going with Pair Song as a way to at least force your opponent out, or if there's at least one Pokemon left on your team and your opponent only has one Pokemon, you could pretty much clinch the game by just going for Pair Song, knowing that eventually they're going to die as a result of the way this move works. So all of these are very viable options as a support move for its fourth move on this set. But Encore, Scald, and Moonblast I think are very good in combination with each other. Though you could always possibly change this up a bit, maybe run like Protect with Toxic or something like that. There's a lot of options to play with there, but all of these are some really great support moves that Primarina has access to. As for this next move set, we're going to turn Primarina into a dual screener. So we're going to run the same nature choices as the previous set, along with the same possible EV spreads of being physically or especially defensive, and the same item as before, but we're also going to add the light clay item as an option to extend the turns of our screens from 5 turns to 8. So with that, the first two moves that we're going to use on this set are going to be Reflect and Light Screen to allow us to take physical hits and special hits better for the entire party for as long as these screens are up. In addition to that, we're also going to run Scald on this set because that is still the best water type attack to go with on any defensive water set because of that chance to burn. And then for your last move slot, either running Moonblast or Rest for the extra coverage in Moonblast or Rest for the extra survivability so that you're able to actually bring in Primarina possibly multiple times to set up screens throughout the battle. And as for this last move set, we're going to be running Primarina as a Rest Talker with kind of two different variations on this moveset. So the first one that you're looking at right here is the defensive variation, again going with the Bold or Calm Nature, Torrent ability, defensive EV spread of either physically defensive or special defensive, again with the option of potentially being mixed defensive in the future. We still don't know exactly what this Pokemon is mainly going to function as in the metagame, but these options are still there with the 4 speed EVs, and then obviously running leftovers to allow you to recover a little bit of health. As for the moves though, it's pretty straightforward as these types of sets will get. So Rest and Sleep Talk is your option of obviously recovering all of your health, removing any statuses, and then continuing to attack while you're asleep through the use of Sleep Talk, and then using just your dual stab combination of Scald and Moonblast. It's also important to note that with Scald, again with that great burn chance, you're able to actually wall off attacks very easily and take hits for a really long time against physical attackers. On the other hand, we could also run this moveset as kind of a bulky Sleep Talker. So we're going to actually give this one a Modest Nature to increase your special attack but lower your physical attack, and then go with an EV spread of 252 HP EVs, 252 special attack EVs, and 4 speed EVs to max out your special attack. And then also in the item slot, including the use of a Life Orb, which actually works extremely effectively on Rest Talk sets. I have done this a few times in the past, and these types of sets where you're Rest Talking and even boosting your damage with a Life Orb actually turn out to be extremely powerful, and more so than I'm even expecting. But overall, the moves don't change here, it's just that they become more powerful if you want to run it this way. But anyways, everybody, that is it for this video. Thank you all for watching, I hope you all enjoyed, and as always, take care, goodbye, and I will see you all next time.